Eden Zero Chapter 205 just released, and I have to say, I enjoyed this chapter, but I think last chapter I enjoyed a lot more due to the revelations of everything else, being the entirety of the chapter, and how it kind of explains a bit of where Ziggy came from. This chapter, however, spent around half of it with Shiki and Ziggy, and the other half with Holy, Jin, Laguna, and the Eden Zero fighting off against Deadend Crow. So, as I kind of figured, we are going to jump around a bit throughout the conclusion of this arc, but we get to learn a bit more about Ziggy and the Eden Zero, as well as bring up some other stuff like contradictions in memories or information, which I'll get into with the initial review. So let's hit the intro and get straight into Eden Zero Chapter 205, titled 3173. So chapter 205 continues basically right after last week, where Ziggy basically tells Shiki that the Eden Zero traveled to this point in time in the Eden Zero world in Universe 3 from the future. It time traveled. And Ziggy states that they basically just extracted Rebecca's ether and just amplified it to extreme degrees, then loaded it onto the ship, as that's what the code 3173 is. That's Etherion. And he even states that he told the Shining Stars that Etherion itself was a weapon, and we all thought it was some type of weapon. But he confirms that that's just the information he gave them. He didn't give them the actual information that it's basically a time machine. So the Eden Zero was brought from 20,000 years into the future, but Ziggy confirms that there's a bit more to it than that. He came from 20,000 years in the future, but it's Universe 3173. That is what Etherion's code means. It's the universe where it came from. And apparently in that universe, Ziggy does not exist. But Shiki sets out into space and takes part in the Ally War, meaning that everything leading up to Ziggy coming back in time, etc. with the Eden Zero all happens in like a time loop, more or less, from what I can tell. I want to make a video based off of this information a bit more, but this is pretty interesting stuff, as everything up to the Ally War in Universe 2 is more or less set in stone. And then Shiki gets flung into the future, Rebecca is dead, used for research material, and Shiki gets turned into Ziggy and has to go back in time. But something happens, and now he wants to kill all the human race, despite his mission being to save the human race and preserve Mother. And Ziggy basically just confirms that the Ally Wars, Shiki going to try and stop the bombs, is a fixed point in time in almost every conceivable universe. So really quick, I'm liking that since they're adding in like time travel aspects, that they're adding in, yeah, you can't just change every little thing about the universe. There are specific points in time that just should not or could not be changed no matter what. It's fixed. And after that, specific events will take place. Which is why it's something that, well, that shouldn't have happened. Ziggy states that this universe, Universe 3, just should not exist. It's outside of the Wheel of Time. Meaning that this universe, the universe that we're in right now, is basically like an alternate timeline that is just separated from the main cause and effect of things that have happened in every other conceivable universe. I mean, she doesn't fully understand the whole time travel landscape, but he brings up the important question that I was thinking about last chapter, and I think we all were. If he was supposed to be some kind of hero from the future to save the human race, why is he trying to wipe them all out? Ziggy states, look, you don't need to understand. She's just like, you refuse to answer the most important questions, and that the idea that you are what I turn into in the future makes me sad. I will never be you. Actually, you're just not me. I like that speech from Shiki, just flat out, despite getting one of the biggest shocks in his life, just being like, you know what, after hearing what you just said, I will never be you, but you are just straight up not me. We're completely different people, and I'm liking that, because this is true. This Shiki that we're following is not the same Shiki. But Ziggy says, of course not. I was Shiki. That is all. Now I am Ziggy the Mechanical King, as he shifts his appearance into a more demonic and evil looking look. As he states, it's about time I showed you what a real king can do, as now we actually get Ziggy's overdrive. it looks menacing as all hell. Now, I don't know how to feel about the giant, bigger horns thing, but either way, I still think this is very, very menacing and honestly very cool. Ziggy proclaims that now it's time to wipe this ghost of my past away, every last trace. Then Etherion will be mine. As we cut back to the Eden Zero, with Deadend Crow trying to swat away, cleaning the Eden Zero. Connor is trying to bring up defensive barriers in the fire barrage, but Hermit is kind of zoning out for a second, and we'll realize why. She counterattacks, and through mental communication with Sister, turns out they heard every single thing that Ziggy said about the future, about who he truly is, and Hermit's just asking Sister, what do you think of it? Sister's like, it's just bizarre as all hell. She can't make heads or tails of it, and Hermit brings up that she agrees. Even if what this Ziggy says is true, there are a multitude of contradictions that I am so glad that Mashima and just characters in the story are presenting and even just acknowledging. Ziggy didn't exist in 3173, so how did they have the Eden Zero? It shouldn't have existed there either. Rebecca's B-Cube had the words Eden Zero carved into it, so why would those specific words be in there? It doesn't make any sense. Because if the Eden Zero was made in 3173, why would they have it in every other conceivable timeline up until that point? And how would Shiki, find it and stuff like that? Because there was a Ziggy, there was an Eden Zero, there was a Four Shining Stars. And the specific wording itself, if the events hadn't happened yet, why would it happen? I feel like Mashima's building up to some kind of even larger reveal by the end of this arc or later down the road for what's going on here. It's very possible that there was actually a Ziggy before this current Ziggy, and the whole time loop thing is a whole big thing. I don't know, I want to see what happens. I am getting intrigued, because time travel is something that I don't particularly like all too much, but I think Mashima's doing it in a way that I'm honestly kind of getting a bit more intrigued with every single time it's being brought up, because Eden Zero's done very fun things with time, with Rebecca and the chronophages. But this, I feel like we need more information, especially with all the contradictions, because this is basically like a time paradox or something that should not exist or happen. But anyway, as Hermit's trying to continue this conversation, Scissor's like, just give it a rest. It's not worth the effort. I'll leave the thinking to you. As she then steps on Clown, again, being like, does Ziggy want to wipe out the human race, destroy Mother, and get Etherion? What is he really after? As Clown just smirks. Creepily, I cannot state how much I do not like clowns. Though this image of Sister just dominant. Okay, I'm not gonna make another joke. I really don't want to make another Sister joke because I feel like just saying all that would just make me demonetized. Anyway, we cut back to Hermit as she's thinking over the information once more. If Ziggy in the Eden Zero didn't exist in 3173, that means the Shining Stars didn't exist either. Just ask, what were we created for? As we then cut back to inside Crow, as the group inside Holy, Clean, and Laguna are wandering around, thinking about, well, does he even have a power source to begin with? But anyway, Holy's arm is broken, and Laguna's like, can you cry for me for a second? And just pulls out an onion out of nowhere, causing her to tear up, which Laguna then turns her arm into water, and then puts it back together, basically healing her arm. That is an application of Laguna's Ether Gear I did not even consider or thought was possible. After this 3-year time skip, Laguna has upgraded his Ether Gear control to a degree where if someone cries, he doesn't have to turn their entire body into water, but can target specific portions of their body to turn into water. Still needs water to activate, but that's still really cool, and it seems like he basically healed her to 100%. Though Laguna just says, despite Holy just praising how useful his Ether Gear is, he states, it's nothing compared to your melting power because it doesn't have any conditions needed to be activated. But then everything starts to get out of hand as a large horde of Deadend Crow minion bots from inside his body are surrounding the group and are attacking them. Anyway, they start to mow down these robots, Laguna with a water splash, Jin with his wind powers, and Holy with her melting abilities. And there's some really nice panels just showing how strong these characters are against just fodder, because despite Crow being a literal beast, just setting out fodder, it shows that they're not too strong, which I feel like if Crow could just make multiple copies of himself, I feel like that would be good. That would be very impressive. But he's probably just putting all of his mental effort into taking down the Eden Zero, because inside his body, he can just create multiple versions of himself, and it's very possible that despite him being enormous, he can't split his focus too much if he could just make implanted consciousness into every single robot. But that's just my thinking. But anyway, they keep trying to tear through them, but it's never ending. They're not stopping. They keep coming and surrounding them until all of a sudden, their ether gear stops working again. And Jin is wondering, Clean, what happened? As we cut to outside, Crow caught Clean's ship, saying that he finally caught her. As he's beginning to crush the ship, Clean jumps out, and then Crow begins to launch a huge punch straight towards her, stating that she won't get away. Hermit and Connor are trying to get her to get out of the way, or are just calling out to her. But Clean basically saying, "Brother, I couldn't. I'm sorry." As Crow lands one hit on Clean as she's thrown flat out into the earth at full force, ending the chapter. So this was another good chapter in terms of information and also tension, because Clean was the main reason they were able to stop the ether jamming that Crow was doing. And now, Clean is out of the fight seemingly, and everyone's stuck inside of Deadend Crow to the point where they're kind of screwed. They're facing a horde of robots with just bare hands, and they can't use their ether gear anymore. Now, do I think Clean is dead? I don't think so, because even though this hit a literal, like, fist the size of a building or a small mountain range, I'm going overboard with this, but literally a huge ass fist from a giant robot going full force with enough speed and power to hit her in the air, basically hits her straight into the ground. We saw the impact. Clean, by all leaps of logic, even if this is a shonen battle manga where everyone can survive multiple different feats of destruction, technically she should just be a stain on the ground at this point. Now, it's very possible that after getting hit, I do think they're going to spin it in a way where Clean used her power to absorb a good chunk of the impact in front and behind her to survive, but she is still very much injured. I don't think they're going to kill off Clean here, because they were building up all the human characters to basically being the core Eden Zero crew if the rest of the Shining Stars, like Sister and Hermit, do end up dying. I don't want that to happen, but they were building stuff like this up, so I do think Clean is still alive, just very injured and probably out of the fight. And the beginning of this chapter also, with the whole Ziggy explaining that he's from like over 3,000 universes away in a different timeline where he shouldn't exist, same with the Eden Zero, and Hermit putting together all these contradictions don't make any sense because certain things shouldn't occur despite these things not happening, or just not existing in these particular timelines or futures. And even bring up what the Shining Star's original purpose is. And these are very important questions that whenever you think about shows with time travel or anything, most of the time, stuff like this is never really acknowledged, which is a feat upon itself, just acknowledging just the contradictions in logic from Ziggy's point of view and how he's explaining things. There's obviously more things to be talked about, but it all comes back to Mother, the Eden Zero, and just humanity as a whole. So, I'm curious to see what's going to happen with all this. I feel like by the end of this arc, we're going to get more exposition and more lore. Also, once again, Ziggy's overdrive is menacing. And if you know shonen battle manga, I was saying this towards the end, if you know shonen battle manga, when a big bad has a form change, if it's more than one alternate form throughout the series, it's probably their final form. I know, the memes. But still, if Ziggy does survive to be the end-all be-all antagonist or villain of the series, he's going to have to get one more form change, but I think this should be the pinnacle of Ziggy's demon, the mechanical demon king. Either way, I'm excited to see what happens next, because now both characters are in overdrive, and I feel like Shiki's going to have a much harder time, because if Ziggy's in overdrive, and Shiki was in overdrive in order to fight against Ziggy initially in base form, then things are going to get very interesting. So, but yeah, all that said and done, a really good chapter once more. I can't wait till next week, and I want to see what else is going to happen with this series and what else can be explained in the future. But with all that said and done, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. It really does help, and it shows that you guys do enjoy my Eden Zero content and want to see more. Also, comment down below. I do read your comments. I try and interact with you as much as I possibly can. I try and interact with your comments and reply to them as much as I humanly possible. But leave your thoughts and opinions on the information from this chapter and what you think is going to happen next, and your theories of what's going to happen in the future. And with all that said and done, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you all have an awesome day.